Fast shot.
Hey. Sports reports, no gimmicks, no clowns. 2-5, Mr. Logical, we run this town. Real talk only, no chasing, no doubt. From the east to the west, it's the order we shout. Mic check, lights flash, game time, stay ready. 2 vets in the zone, keep the pressure real heavy. Big hits, big plays, yeah, we breaking it down. Truth rings in your speakers, every word is the crown. From the north side hustle to that southern flame. Midwest grind, west coast of the game. Sports talk kings, yeah, we wear that crown. Turn it up, let them know it's about to go down. Sports reports, no gimmicks, no clowns. 2-5, Mr. Logical, we run this town. Real talk only, no chaser, no doubt. From the east to the west, it's the order we shout.
It's about to go down.
Yes. It's been a long time. I shouldn't have left you without some fresh takes to bitch about. You know what I'm saying? Sports Reports' order is back. You know, we got the one and only world famous Mr. Logical. I am 2-5, your unorthodox statistician. We got a lot to get to tonight. There's some coaches that were on the hot seat. They just flat out asses burnt right now. You know what I'm saying? We got college football playoff predictions. We're going to talk about the NFL playoffs, and we're going to give y'all a chance to poke fun at us. What did we get right, and what did we get wrong? So do me a favor out there. Like, review, subscribe, share, rate, do all the free things. Do all the good things. Hopefully you got a liquid death in your hand, but I ain't even going to lie to you because my tummy is a little messed up, so I got a Canada Dry in my hand. You know
Hood remedy.
Yes, sir. But let's get right to it, Mr. Logical. So, of course, yesterday, Black Monday happened. And then today we got a surprise firing. Well, not really a surprise. It was talked about, but a surprise.
Yeah, surprise.
Yeah, but we're going to take it right from the top. You know, Raheem Morris, you know, won the last 4 games of the season. You know, Kirk Cousins in for Michael Penix. Are you still on board with getting rid of him and Fontenot?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm never going to advocate for somebody losing their job, but I got to be, you know, transparent in my analysis. It was fool's gold the way they played down the stretch. And I don't think it was a reflection of him, mainly because it has been so many games over the last 2 seasons where the game was important, the moment was important, and either the team was ill prepared or he didn't execute. We go back to last year against Washington. When Mooney does catch that pass down the right side and he doesn't go out of bounds, and you're sitting on 2 timeouts, less than 30 seconds, rookie quarterback, 3rd or 4th start maybe, call a timeout, settle things down. That's your job. The way he handled timeouts,
the game in England against the Colts,
yeah, the way he did it multiple times, where it's like the commentator was like, "Hey, if I was Raheem, I'd be calling a timeout here." And then, so it just was like little pieces like that that said, if you can beat Buffalo, you can beat the Rams, you can have the yardage, scrimmage yard leader and Bijan Robinson on your team offensively, even though your offensive play caller was terrible, but yet you can't beat Carolina. You get shut out by Carolina. Like, I think only a couple of teams got shut out this season, Atlanta being one of them, by a team that went 8-9 with a quarterback that they're probably not going to keep. So it's just those, I think that weighed heavier than them getting, you know, the final 4 answers correct on the test. It's like, yo, you bombed the other part of the test.
Well, you know what's crazy is looking at this season as a whole, just in a vacuum from, from a high view, you know, from a macro view, you look at things and you go, hey, they beat the Bills and the Rams this season. You know, they finished on a 4-game winning streak. And like you said, they lost by 30 to Carolina, 30-0. Not only that, Mr. Logical, they lost by 24 to Miami. You know what I mean? They lost to the Jets.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
If they beat the Jets, they win the division. If they
beat Carolina once, they win the division.
The the first half against Buffalo and the first half against the Rams, they had 21 points, and they score 3 in the second half, and I think 6 in the second half against the Rams. So it's like even in those winning moments, there's flaws in your coaching iron. Like it's just like you got a 21-0 lead, you put up 21 points on Buffalo, but then you come on the second half and can't get drives together. You let a block punt up against the Rams. So it's just little things like that it was like, okay, yeah, we're winning these games, but you're down to Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay went 1-7 in their last like 8 games.
Yeah.
So it was like, yeah.
And I don't even want to be hyperbolic. I don't even want to be hyperbolic. But when it comes to Fontenot, it's like, hey, as soon as you traded that first round pick for James Pierce, you were on borrowed time. There.
When he went 3 years in a row taking offensive players at 8, because we were drafting 8 every year, and didn't get any Georgia defensive linemen off those national championship contending teams, when you're right there in the state, and Philly got 5 of them right now, starting on their defense. Legit, in the same amount of time, you could have got a couple of them. Like Jalen Carter slipped because he had incidents, whatever, running down the stretch, but that happens every draft. James Pierce slipped. He was probably projected to slip out of the first round. And I understand trading back in for a talent, but it's like the first round pick of 2026 shouldn't even been on the table.
Well, especially considering the pick before the Giants got Jackson Dart. They came up to get a quarterback and didn't give up a first for a quarterback. Like, hello, here's your sign.
Yeah, so drafted Michael Penix, and Arthur Blank is kind of looking like, dog, I just gave another dude $180 million in my Home Depot money. And now I'm be good. Yeah, so yeah.
I understand the Penix pick on some levels, though. I do. But the problem is that Michael Penix isn't Peyton Manning. He isn't, of that ilk. That's the problem.
We don't. The prop. It's not even his talent. It's the timing. You just signed the guy to a 4-year deal. Even if you were expecting him to do 3 of the 4 years. So even if you were expecting him to do 2 of the 4 years, and then you were going to move on to Michael Penix.
And Penix was older.
That means you would have taken a 25-year-old quarterback and expected him to sit for 34 games and watch a 34-year-old, 35-year-old quarterback play while you paid him $90 million and then send him. Like, it just, the whole philosophy didn't make any sense.
After everything we've seen, they might as well have grabbed JJ McCarthy. Like, if that was, you know what I mean? Somebody that actually needed
taken a defensive player or guard or somebody that can block, because Kirk Cousins had a defensive tackle in his chest, or Penix had a defensive tackle in his chest every single week. So, yeah, the pick, I don't care how people justify it by saying, well, look, they had to bench Cousins. Yeah, well, you wouldn't have been so quick to bench Cousins if you would have gotten maybe, even if you wanted to go offense, a big wide receiver there, another tight end. Like, you could have done so many different things that could have helped the team last season and this season. Now they're in hell because Drake London's going to have to get paid. Kyle Pitts is going to have to get paid. And Bijan's going to have to get paid.
Yep. Somebody got to be the odd man out. But, hey, I just got one request.
For a year, he's going to have to get paid before he comes back. So good luck, buddies.
I just got one request. And this is kind of a joke, kind of not a joke. But just going off of the last coaching cycles, don't bring in Bill Belichick.
There's a no-brainer. There's a no-brainer hire.
Oh, who is that?
No.
Is that Harbaugh?
Harbaugh would make the
whoa. The guy that you wanted fired just 5 weeks ago is the guy that you want now.
I think Baltimore had different. I think Baltimore Baltimore had everything they needed. They just couldn't get over the hump. And I don't think it was anything that they could do. I just think for some reason, those pieces they had very high expectations, very low margin for error. And it seemed like every moment where the low margin for error was there, they made the error. In the playoff game, the fumbles. Early on this year with Derrick Henry fumbling the ball 3 games in a row. The final play of the year
was that set the tone for the whole season.
The final play of the year, the kicker missing the kick. Harbaugh still has a job if that kick goes through. So if I'm Baltimore, if I'm Harbaugh, I'm looking at it like, so my whole job is contingent on this kick, or was this kick gonna go through? I was gonna coach next week's playoff game, and if he would have lost that, I would have been fired. So it was like, I just think from a stability and the credibility standpoint, because Atlanta they don't hire that guy. They hire like I don't know who they hire, but they need to hire. Tennessee letting Vrabel go. It was like, why? Like that's a coach. That is an NFL coach. That's an adult in the building, and
so this is the thing. This is the thing about Harbaugh. Harbaugh has cost the Ravens a lot of games over the years, but it's different than what we were talking about with Raheem Morris, because with Raheem Morris, we're talking about actual, saving time, having more opportunities to try to get points.
Like missing opportunities, whereas Harbaugh would kind of force the issue.
Right. So he would go for 2 for no reason. You know what I mean? Like we argued about the biggest argument
Buffalo
that started.
one, yeah.
Sports Reports is ordered. The 4th down that he went for.
I still think that made sense if they just would have ran the ball. Because you throw the ball quick, is incomplete, or you run up the middle. You got Buffalo inside the 1, and they still need to score a touchdown. And then you get a sack and everything else, threw it all off.
And then you got the whole, is it time for a new voice, because he's been there for quite some time now. That Super Bowl, in fact, was 12 years ago. So that's a very long time to be listening to the same voice. But you and I came into this season, and I know that you don't generally like to do this, but I was asking, is Baltimore championship or bust? What's up, Rez? I was asking if that was Super Bowl or bust. And I know you don't like to do that. And I don't necessarily want to do that. But when you're a team like Baltimore, you have to think like that. You have to think like that. You were just in the AFC Championship game 2 years ago. We see what Kansas City is right now. So if you would have
one of the 6 elite quarterbacks in the game and one of the 4 or 5 elite running backs.
Yeah, because even if you snuck into the playoffs, that field goal goes through that you're talking about. Even if that goes through, you're looking at the AFC, and we talked about this last week. You got Denver with an inexperienced team and quarterback. New England hasn't been there yet. You know what I mean? Jacksonville, has been to the playoffs, but at the same time, this version of the Jags hasn't had a lot of success, in that way. We don't believe in Justin Herbert in the playoffs.
No,
you know what I mean?
We haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, you got the Texans are just now figuring out how to play offense, but can they do it against a good defense? The Steel, so as you look up and down the AFC, even if Baltimore gets into the playoff with that win the other night, you still have to have that attitude of our record is 0-0 now, and we're about to go.
Real quick, hold on. Michigan's been killing everybody this year, number 2 ranked team.
Yeah, playing Penn State tonight, 23-point favorite.
Penn State had the ball with about 11 seconds left. Probably when you started talking, when I started making this face, the guy dribbles it across the court. No passes, no action, doesn't take a screen. He gets a big switched on to him, dribbles back and forth, and he just launches up a 26-foot three-pointer off the dribble, and they lose by 2. Terrible offense. But, yeah, my bad.
Could have been the biggest win in school history. But hey, for all you degenerates out there, that was a part of my parlay tonight. Penn State covering the 23. But anyway, Harbaugh, like if you're the Ravens, you have that attitude of our record is 0-0. It's a new season. We don't necessarily want to go on the road for everything, but We got the run game. We got Derrick Henry with us, so we're not afraid of anybody. That would have been the attitude that Baltimore probably takes into the playoff if they would have got in. So that's what I mean by is it Super Bowl or bust? Because you got expectations now. You've been successful for too long with no title to show for it. And I know only one team wins the title. It's hard to win the title. I know, but I don't care. You know what I'm saying? You got a 3-time MVP? You know what I mean? Unanimous MVP. Just 2 years ago, you hosted the AFC Championship game and gave that game to Kansas City. Zay Flowers.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. It's tough because I get if he's done with coaching, I'd understand. 18 years, one place, Super Bowl appearance. Super Bowl victory against his brother. Really big game. The whole family was there. It was a great game. If he's like, yo, I'm done with this, I can get it because if you're Baltimore, who are you going to get and what expectation are you going to levy upon them next year? Because you can't give them the same Harbaugh expectation. You can't be like, oh, we got rid of this guy who got us to the Super Bowl, got us to AFC Championship games. Now we're going to bring in.
I'm glad you said that because one of the names that I've heard so far is Cliff Kingsbury. That's the name that I've heard.
He just got fired as offensive coordinator, and he's been fired as a head coach. He hasn't mutually parted ways with any team or been successful on his way out. He left Texas Tech at 5-7. He went to Arizona, got fired. Went to Washington, just got fired. I don't know how these guys keep getting fired and going up. I get that it sounds like a great idea because I saw the same thing. Lamar Jackson.
Yes, he should have. Yeah.
I get what, like this, like the Madden 26 version of it with like a crazy playbook from a college coach and an ultra dynamic professional quarterback, but we have seen him not succeed in these spaces before. I don't know how his name, if you want to bring him on as an offensive coordinator with a strong-minded head coach, like if you brought in a guy like Mike McCarthy and then you had Kingsbury as your offensive coordinator, I could rock with that because I think he would be able to watch McCarthy work. Because for all intents and purposes, McCarthy and Sean Payton were about the same type of coach.
So this is the thing, Riz, and I don't like that argument because it feels lazy to me. Because you don't know who's going to be better if you don't try to find better. You don't know. So like he's not going to be better than Harbaugh was. Like I said, back in 2013, you're probably not going to find a coach that's better than that version of John Harbaugh, but that's not the John Harbaugh of today. You know what I mean? And from that standpoint, I don't want to say Harbaugh should have been fired, but I don't have a problem with it. You know what I'm saying? I don't have a problem with it because I do believe in reset, new voices. And I just saw a report right before we went live that the reason that he got fired or part of the reason, the bigger reason that he got fired was because he didn't want to let go of Todd Monken. And I know that Mr. Logical will sit up here and tell you that he's been asking for Todd Monken to go for about 2 years now.
And like I said, that was probably the key. Is like, all right, we need a whole new regime change. Luckily, I don't think they're in a salary cap conundrum. I don't think Derrick Henry's getting that much money. Lamar's getting a big chunk. I don't think that many guys on defense are getting that big of money. And I don't believe a lot of guys played so above their position that they can command top. I don't think Zay Flowers, if his extension is up or due, he can't demand Justin Jefferson money.
I think Baltimore does have a good. They're not as good as that Super Bowl team, of course, but this is still a good team. They have 2 tight ends that a lot of teams would just want one of them. You know what I mean? Yeah. They got Derrick Henry, who just passed. He's catching up to Emmitt Smith in touchdowns. He's top 10 all time in rushing yards. They got Lamar Jackson, like I said, MVPs galore. The problem is, you just touched on it. The problem is that They don't have the receivers. They've never given Lamar the receivers that could take the top off the defense, or, like Zay Flowers is not a number one. You know what I mean? That's number one. In fact, Baltimore's defense this year in particular, they just had a lot of injuries. So I'm not going to say that they're not a good team because they were hurt.
In the Pittsburgh game, like Kyle Hamilton went out. A lot of guys were just going out.
And even with that, they were still a field goal away from the playoffs.
If that field goal goes in, they win the division. And that argument that we were all having weeks ago about, can Baltimore win the division? I was like, no way. I didn't think it was going to come down to a Sunday night Week 18 kick, but it did.
So also, in non-surprising news, that former Super Bowl champion head coach, former national champion head coach, Pete Carroll, has been shown the door in Las Vegas. He should have never been hired in the first place. How about that? Like, there was no other way for this to end. The numbers are just ugly. 14 points per game. They scored less points. Check this out. They scored less points per game than Cleveland, Tennessee, and the Jets. They have talent, but not enough.
Worst off-season NFL transaction of any position.
And they fired Chip Kelly in the middle of the season.
Any position, any addition or subtraction that was made in the 2025 offseason, leading up to the beginning of the season that started in September, the Pete Carroll hire was probably the worst one, because you knew ultimately the Raiders didn't have enough to win this 25-26 season off the bat. You knew that going into the season. You knew definitively they were a long fourth in their division. So you're not even sniffing the playoffs. Even if 3 teams from your division make the playoffs,
and he's 74.
They were light years behind whoever was going to finish third in that division. And you hire a guy who's in his mid-70s for a team that needs 2 full seasons of growth in order to potentially compete with teams that are only going to get better in their own division.
So if you were going to do something like that, if you were going to hire a Pete Carroll, that is where you would hire a Kingsbury or someone like that as your offensive coordinator, and you go through 2 years of Pete Carroll boot camp, to become a head coach. And now you got
if you
continuity in place.
Pete Carroll, you should have made up a position called
president
of player execution and consultant, and have him sit up there with the old boy with his fade, and then hire some young coach off of somebody's offensive staff or defensive staff, and he can constitute whatever Legion of Boom defense he had instituted in Seattle. But having him on the sideline it was a waste of his year. Like, he didn't get anything out of that.
One of the biggest jokes in college football is how much money is Auburn paying their former coaches. The Raiders are paying $50 million to 5 coaches right now. 5 coaches.
And I don't think the Gruden numbers disclosed, right?
No, but they're still paying the interim.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, like, if that Gruden number could literally be, he might get, because he was on a $100 million deal. I think he got fired 2 years in. So, basic math that I learned back in elementary school, it's $10 million a year. You owe him about 70, and they haven't been paying him, or he's been suing. So, on top of that 50, you might get sued for another 100.
Well, how about this rumor, Mr. Logical? Word on the street is that the recently dismissed Kevin Stefanski might take Matt LaFleur's job.
Matt in Green Bay?
Yeah.
Well, if that happens, go ahead and send them all down to ATL.
Yeah, that's the word on the street is that if they fire
Matt LaFleur, let's get off the mat.
Well, yeah, that's the talk, is that if they were to fire LaFleur, then Stefanski would be the lead candidate.
I don't know what Stefanski's done or shown you over the last couple of years that says he's a guy you want to bring in. Because this year, granted, he had, he wasn't really dealing with much as far as like the quarterback position. I just feel like it just wasn't handled. It wasn't handled as if he had any say, and he kind of like it looked like he pouted about it. Like basically, he was like, "Oh, this is nothing to do with me. Oh, we got bugs in here now."
Well, he's a two-time coach of the year that people respect, even though he has a 45-56 career record.
Yeah, he had a couple of good runs with Baker, but rumor has it that he didn't want Deshaun Watson.
Who did?
I don't know why Cleveland wanted him as bad as they did. Atlanta was in the mix for that. I remember that call, but they gave him the guaranteed deal, and then they got these other quarterbacks in. It just felt like he operated this whole year as if this situation, this predicament that we're in is not my fault, and I'm doing the best that I can to remedy it versus, all right, I got two young quarterbacks. One guy is clearly bigger and stronger than the other guy. This is an NFL game where bigger and stronger is a factor. And if one guy's picking up the offense a little quicker, but he's just completely undersized, I got to, like, especially when it's even, a third round pick and a fifth round pick, that's a wash to me. The money can't be that much different. So it's like, I'm going to go with the guy who's already kind of like capsulated the locker room. He has the claim. Let me get him out here and see what he can do.
I don't know.
It just felt like he operated like he was forced. He operated like he was forced to deal with the players that he had, and the result just was there was a lot of occasions where I remember when I saw somebody clipped it together, but this is something I was noticing like in the couple of weeks as well. It was a critical moment. It was like a fourth down. Cleveland had called timeout. It was like a 4th and 1 from like the 40, 45. It was like, we can punt it. We could go for it. Let's call timeout. Offense comes to the sideline. Stefanski's not talking to Shador. And I don't know if it was the same thing with Dylan Gabriel, but it's like, bro, it's 4th and 1. Like, you make the call to, like, go for it. But yet, the team is in a huddle, and he's literally standing off 5-7 yards away, looking the opposite direction. I'm like, even if he's like, all right, I'm not going to micromanage the play call because I'm letting the offensive coordinator call it. I'm in the huddle. So the message that we're getting from Tommy Reese from the booth in the Shador's helmet or whoever they're talking to, it's like, oh, yeah, this is the play. This is how this looks. Be sure to look out for this, blah, blah, blah. Like a basic timeout. But he wasn't even.
Yeah, and I mean, they had a great draft this year. That was what made it so odd for me. I mean, take the quarterback part out of it. They went and got, Quinshawn Judkins. I mean, he ended up getting hurt at the end of the year, but still, Harold Fannin, with, 431 yards, 6 touchdowns off of 72 catches, so like they had talent, that was still young, and you would feel like, let's make this work. But maybe he was just tired, and I'm not using that as an excuse, but maybe he was just tired because the Browns are the Browns. They went and got Dylan Sampson too.
Quiet quitting.
Yeah, that's exactly what he did. And so like I think that if he were to go somewhere like Green Bay, what I'm saying, I think that would be an okay fit. I actually thought that maybe Atlanta should look at him. You know what I mean? But but we'll have to see. He has
to have you need a guy. I remember when I got promoted to master, and we were talking about it. It was like, with the new board system and everything else. I was talking to another guy about getting promoted. I was like, yo, this is what I noticed is like you need to be somebody's guy. Like somebody in upper management needs to like you, and then your accolades they can push because they like you, because everyone's going to have the same basic stuff. If you deploy, everybody's getting the same bullets. If you're working a flat line on a day-to-day basis, and we've been out there the whole year together, those bullets are about the same unless you do some particular stuff like for you that you were involved with. But for the most part, it's going to be on the same level. You need somebody upstairs that's like, yo, this is my guy. Sergeant Wilson is the guy. He's ready. Sergeant Rutley, he's the guy. He's ready. Like, you need somebody pushing. And if for Stefanski to get another job, he has to have somebody in the league that's like that just understands that Cleveland was a shit show.
And they were.
Understood for weeks that either they had an actual conversation or they could just tell by his body language or his representation reached out and was like, listen, he knows he's out at the end of the year. He's just doing the best he can to win games, but he's not allowed to make decisions in the building. So he gave up play calling, somebody has to be working for him behind the scenes for him to go straight from being completely dismissive of his responsibilities in Cleveland for the most part, at least publicly, it seems to appear that way, for him to walk right into a job like Green Bay.
So the guy that I want as my next defensive coordinator got fired yesterday. Old Jonathan Gannon.
Oh, Gannon.
Gannon out in Arizona. Former Super Bowl defensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles.
That motivational speech should have got him fired 2 years ago.
Well, it's odd because, Arizona came on last year, and we were both high on them coming into the season this year a little bit. So, they came in, they finished 8-9 last year, and then I figured they could carry that momentum into this year and sneak into the playoff. Okay. So Kyler Murray gets hurt. Then John Connor gets hurt. Trey Benson get hurt. Anybody that called themselves a running back got hurt. Marvin Harrison Jr. missed times. Will Johnson missed time. So like there was a whole cluster of bad luck going on in Arizona this year. So I was actually shocked that he got fired. I know his career record is only 15-36. They ended the year.
That's probably more to do with it.
Out.
It's like, even when we're healthy, we're not inspiring.
But they were.
Really? You would call
yes.
If you looked at that, they're a lot like the NFC West and the AFC West are pretty similar in the sense that there's three teams that are just definitively better than the fourth team. Arizona was the fourth team. And they needed a secondary, they needed like a second gear of inspiration to just be able to compete consistently with these teams. Seattle,
they went from 4-13 to 8-9. And it ain't my job as the head coach to bring the players in here either.
Atlanta was 8-9 this year. Do you think at any point of the year, like, they're an inspiring team?
No, but Arizona, during that 8-9, Arizona beat the Rams. They beat the 49ers. You know what I mean?
But
whereas Atlanta was losing. Atlanta was getting shut out by Carolina, losing by 24 to Miami.
Atlanta had a real shot going into the season because of the strength of the division to be first. Every team,
but they're not a good team. They just play in a shitty division.
Arizona doesn't have one. They didn't have a shot. And then they have a coach that can't seem to. I know it's a tough ask, but it's like, we're out of it. You can't get us any closer. Why bring you back? See what I'm saying? It's like, if it's like we talked about Stefanski just now. Stefanski looked like whatever management, because they kept the GM. But you give it another.
Then why bring him back?
Because you signed a decent length contract. You got to give him an opportunity. But I think after 3 years, like, you know what? This just ain't it. And that, I think, come to that realization.
I think that and obviously, like, we're not GMs, we're not owners or anything like that. But there's got to be some kind of context that comes into these situations. You know what I mean? Like he literally was missing his top 3 offensive players.
Okay, well, let's look at Kyle Shanahan. Granted, Kyle Shanahan is a top-tier coach. But what makes him clearly a top-tier coach is when he has the talent, they excel. And when he was losing this talent, they still were getting over the hump. They were still winning games with Mac Jones. Fred Warner went out with a bad ankle injury. The defense
Yeah,
still
Kyle
played
Shanahan's
well.
also been a head coach for 8 years.
But he's had some bad runs where it was like, but you can still tell, like, okay, he has this thing that he does well, independent of the team he was on. Gannon's claim to fame is Howie Roseman got me a bunch of great defensive players. We rode that wave to regular season playoff success, and then I got hired. Now, did he bring anything that you saw in Philly with him to Phoenix? Probably not. And I think that's you're looking at it like, okay, we just hired a guy that was just a guy.
They just gave him decent defensive players this year.
I'm not saying they did a great job of getting players around him, but even if just looking at him is like, we still just got a guy. We got a regular guy. We don't have that much going on. Let's see if we can get out of this and maybe get somebody in a little bit more inspiring. Because, like I said,
so who do you bring in? Like, do they look at a Mike McCarthy, or do they look at who do they look at? Do they reach out to Harbaugh? He probably ain't taking it.
Harbaugh's probably not taking it. I haven't really heard a lot of hot offensive coordinators around.
I did actually hear people trying to get Signetti to Vegas, though.
Man, Nasty not going to Vegas. I would say maybe somebody on the Rams offensively, somebody in the quarterback passing game coordinator, offensive coordinator, somebody in that room, because you've seen them up close a couple of times a year for the past few years. You saw what Stafford just did. I think someone of that space. I don't know if you bring in like a seasoned guy, because I don't think you have enough seasoned vets on the team for that seasoned guy's message to resonate. Like if you have a young team, I think you bring in somebody that you could be a little bit excited about. Denver got lucky bringing in Sean Payton and then matching him with the young quarterback, and it just happens to work out. But he had Russell Wilson at first, and it wasn't working out so well. See what I'm saying? It's like I think you just kind of have to match the personalities.
Well, I sent you, that they're interested in bringing in Robert Saleh, but I think they're looking at the wrong side of the ball and the wrong team in the division. Maybe you reach out to Clint Kubiak in Seattle, and see, get Kyler, because Kyler, I don't know what his value is at this point. I don't know if you can move off of Kyler right now. So I would think that you're looking for someone that you feel can get as much out of Kyler as they can.
Yeah, but like it's the same like thought process I was going with the Rams. Somebody you've seen in action. You've seen it twice up close. You watched a lot of film because you played the team twice. I think something like, but just I wouldn't go with the McCarthy. I wouldn't go with an older retread. I would go with something new, something speedy. You're out west, a lot of lanes. I need something high speed to because like that Gannon thing I told you, that opening speech, I was like, this ain't gonna last. I told you that when it happened. I'm like, this ain't gonna last. That was the most uninspiring thing ever, and I think honestly, that probably resonated throughout his entire tenure.
All right, you ready to play a game?
Let's go.
All right, I'm going to give you. Hold on, let me make sure I got enough here. Okay, so I'm going to give you my 14 through 1. This is the order of 2-5's probability of who's going to win the Super Bowl. And I want you to tell me where I got it wrong.
14 different options.
Well, I just went all the 14 teams in the playoffs and just ranked them 1 to 14.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
So, I thought you were going to hit me with some Doctor Strange.
No.
14 million possibilities.
All right, so I'm going to start 14 to 1. Carolina, Green Bay, Pittsburgh, Chargers, 49ers, Bears, Texans, Patriots, Seahawks, Jaguars, Philly, and then 3 to 1, Denver, Rams, Bills.
Yeah, I think yeah, I'm give me give me 10 through 14.
10 starting at 10.
Yeah.
Chargers, Steelers, Packers, Panthers.
Okay, I think that's about right. Give me 5 through 9.
All right. So 5 through 9 is Jacksonville, Seattle, New England, Houston, and Chicago.
Where's San Francisco?
I got San Francisco at 9.
I think San Francisco is probably higher. I have the Houston. They have great first round playoff games. Like great, like they are just top tier, 32-12, dominating first round playoff games. Second round playoff games, they disappear.
Yeah, so like for me, the 49ers, I love the 49ers. This team, it should have a story written about them, and they just lost Bethune as well for the rest of the season. So, they just go through bodies and next man up rules apply and they just keep on trucking. The problem is for me is that I just think that runs out at some point because now we're talking about the playoffs. You ain't getting that breather against Arizona now. You're not getting Washington. You're not getting the Giants. Like you're going up against the best
Are you
teams in the
catching
league.
Philly in a funk though? Are you?
You could be.
Are you catching Philly, a good team, in a funk? And I don't want to say you get an easy victory because I don't think there's any games you can just they call easy victories and in Philly. But
no, I think they absolutely
like Philly doesn't look good in the second half. They don't look good after their first 15 scripted plays are done. It just looks very pedestrian. And it's been very obvious throughout the year, like how it's affected the sideline.
If Philly plays the game that they should play, which is a whole lot of Saquon probably, I think that they can open up San Francisco and like, I don't think they're going to walk all over them or anything like that. I think San Francisco covers the 5.5, but I think that it just runs out at some point. You know what I mean? At some point you just need start 1 through 4 was Buffalo, Rams, even though I might consider switching them, and then Denver and Philly.
And you had the Bears.
I had the Bears at 8, right in front of San Francisco. And I think that the Bears, I like 8. The Bears for me is just an experience thing. Ben Johnson, first time head coach, Caleb Williams, first time in the playoffs. We've seen not the best decision making, misses a lot of open receivers.
I think Chicago is likely to do a fake punt.
Maybe.
Like a fake
punt.
But
that could also burn
work.
you.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
Yeah, Dan Campbell style.
I think they have that play on the little top corner of the call sheet, and it's a situation that probably analytically they already have kind of identified. Like, hey, second quarter, we haven't moved the ball much. 4th and 4 from the 40, 41. We're gonna fake this punt.
Yeah,
and they're just gonna go with it no matter what happened on the previous play, no matter what I think that will be their Achilles heel is that he'll be able to draw up a play like that, or some play where they put Tyson Bagent in the game, he throws it back to Caleb Williams, and Caleb Williams throws the fleet, just something unnecessary that doesn't work, like that pass back to Caleb Williams goes over his head. And Green Bay recovers it, and now they're at the 35-yard line.
Yeah,
up 10-6, about to go up, 17-6, something like that.
And here we are. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago, right? Buffalo and their pressure. They're the 6th seed. Starting out with Jacksonville, so they could, if it plays out chalk. Besides them, they could go Jacksonville, New England back to back. You know what I mean? Which is going to be a tough road to hoe.
I think that's a tough road because they don't get any home games. I think being number one, slated as your number one odds team, and not having a home playoff game. Granted, they're a cold weather team. If they play in, so their first round matchup
Jacksonville
is Jacksonville. Theoretically, North Florida is probably going to be reasonably warm, somewhere around 60, maybe on Sunday. Nothing crazy. Winner of that game, they're going. If they win that game, they're going to Denver. So it's another cold weather game, but it's in the altitude.
So are you giving Justin Herbert some leeway? They got a chance against the Patriots. We'll make our picks Friday, but just initial thought.
I'm gonna say I don't know how healthy that hand is, and I know Vrabel being a former linebacker and the guy who learned from the other guy about how to take that inch and make it a mile. I could just see a lot of pressure where they're just knocking him down and make him fall on his hand a lot. Get like every drop back, try to get into him, try to make him push off with their hand, just knock him down as much as you can.
So I saw some
linebackers. Yeah,
I saw some odds today that had Seattle as the Super Bowl favorite. Actually, I don't know how I feel about that, just because of who their quarterback is, but the NFC runs through Lumen Field. You know what I mean? So you got to go there. So if they do get to the Super Bowl, it's going to be off of the back of that defense in the 12th man. But is there a team in this playoff that isn't necessarily being talked about that you wouldn't be shocked if they at least made it to the Super Bowl?
All right.
They ain't got to win it, but just at least get to the Super Bowl.
I like Jacksonville.
Okay.
I know they had a relatively, I want to say, easy division. They had, the quarterback has recency. He's been in the playoffs. He had a big comeback against Justin Herbert a couple years ago. They dueled it out with Kansas City at Arrowhead. I mean, Patrick Mahomes had a bad ankle. I don't know why they just didn't blitz him more, but that's just me. I would have sent the house. Like, listen, you have to throw off that bad ankle, in a hurry. I think Jacksonville's a team. I think just having the bye and the home field advantage that Denver has, I believe they're probably a strong Super Bowl contender. This is a strange year where 1 and 2 in each conference is probably not getting the most love. I don't think a lot of pundits are calling for Seattle, Chicago NFC Championship, nor are they calling for a Denver, New England AFC Championship.
Wouldn't that be something, though?
I mean, it's chalk, but in the same sense, like you have Buffalo number one because you're leaning on experience. So I would say Denver making it to the Super Bowl would probably be surprising, even though they're number one seed. I think New England with the young quarterback and surprise Philly. I think it would surprise a lot of people if Philly figured it out between not going for the number 2 seed last week when you could have, and this week, and then making a run. It just seems like the most Philly thing to do with the come out this week. Jalen Hurts goes 24 for 28. Devontae Smith goes for 116 yards and a touchdown. Goddard gets you about 80. A.J. Brown gets you 6 catches, 115 yards, 1 touchdown. Saquon goes for 80 and a couple of screens. It's like everything just works.
Mm-hmm.
And they beat the brakes off San Francisco or something like that, and now they're rolling again.
All right, last question before we move on. If Buffalo loses on Sunday, Pittsburgh loses on Monday,
who gets fired first?
Which one is more likely to get fired?
Fired McDermott, parted ways Mike Tomlin. I think the terminology would be different, but as far as like not replacing the coach, Buffalo. I think Buffalo, because you have kind of bestowed the year that Buffalo needs to win it all because all the other perennial top tier quarterbacks are out. There's no Mahomes, there's no Burrow. There's no Lamar.
They have the best quarterback in the AFC, and like out of all the playoff teams, they have the best quarterback. They have the running game to go with that quarterback if they choose to use it.
Yeah. So like I said, you've given them this responsibility as you need to carry the torch and represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. I think that might resonate a lot with the fan base and maybe even like team leadership, because if you get knocked out in the first round by Jacksonville, which is possible, you're playing
it is possible
game on the road.
Yeah,
they won their division, they won double-digit games.
They won at Mile High.
Just a few weeks ago. They beat Kansas City. They early on in the year they were leading the league in interceptions. So they're a complete team. They have weapons all over the field. Their quarterback is coming into his own. So it wouldn't be like, oh, you lost to a team that's kind of figuring out. Like if they lose to the Chargers, who are kind of like a good team, but you could tell like, hey, ups and downs throughout the year, they're piecing together. Guys are injured. Guys are on IR, like important guys.
Herbert doesn't have good playoff games.
Herbert doesn't have good playoff games. He's injured. That game might look like, come on, man, you got to be able to beat that team. But Jacksonville could be a tough game. But I do think that it would, if some of these offensive coaches don't take jobs this week, like if Stefanski doesn't take a job this week, or if Kingsbury doesn't, granted, I don't think he should be a head coaching candidate, but if the hiring process is very slow, I'm banking on agents and representatives who have some inside information on who could be gone from some of these first round teams that exit.
Well, we already talked about Matt LaFleur too.
I think LaFleur could be gone. Sean McVay could just be like, I'm done, because staff could be like, you know what, I don't know if I'm gonna let this back heal up and do it all over again. So that's 2 spots. I'm pretty sure Sirianni and Ben Johnson and Shanahan, all those guys are still good. So give me the Rams and Green Bay. Those spots could open up potentially. Pittsburgh with a loss could open up potentially, and probably Buffalo.
Okay.
So that's 4 teams on top of the 7 teams that currently don't have like head coaches. That's a third of the league. So if guys aren't getting hired, I would say like that is probably on the that's on the horizon. That's on some of the radar of some of these representatives. Like, hey, guys could be moving if they don't make it to the second round of the playoffs.
All right. So, let's play another game, a game of pass fail. So we're going to talk about things that we said this season that we got right and things that we said that we got wrong. So, I guess we'll start it with, let's start positive with what we got right. So what did you get right?
I'm trying to think, man. Like I didn't do great with my predictions.
You know what? I'll tell you what.
Many.
So this is a positive and a negative at the same time. Jacksonville was the one division champion I got right.
Hold on, let me check my notes, because like at some point I started writing like in the middle.
That's a good point, Brez.
What's that? What do you say?
That Harbaugh getting fired could impact the Steelers letting go of Tomlin. And how did Zach Taylor keep his job?
That's probably because they're looking like, well, we're not doing that bad. But I don't know how many guys they keep in
Cincinnati.
So here we go. What I got here. AFC North, I had Baltimore winning.
I had Baltimore as well.
I did have Pittsburgh at 9-8, so I had them above 500. So I got that right.
Okay.
What else do I have?
I had Buffalo winning the East.
I'm pretty sure I had the same thing. Here's some notes in my class.
I did have Jacksonville, so that's the one. I had the Chargers winning the West. And I think
you did. And I was staunched on KC winning. I was like, until you beat them, it's KC or no one.
Yeah, and I think they were. I know that is crazy. I think that the Chargers were on track, said until Joe Alt got hurt, and then it just kind of faded. And then Amarion Hampton got hurt. It just kind of went to hell from there. But that game in Jacksonville was the game that really ended it because they got whooped that day. In the East, the NFC East, you had Philly. I had Washington, but I only picked Washington because we couldn't agree on everything. So, but in my heart, I took Philly, but it is what it is. I'll take that L. I took Green Bay to win the North. I did take Tampa to win the South.
I had Arizona at 3-14. I had Atlanta going 10-7 and winning the NFC South, which you beat Carolina, you beat the Jets. That happens.
Yeah. And then I picked the 49ers to win the West, which they came down to the last game of the season.
I was on that same path.
But something else that I got right. The Detroit Lions not making the playoffs.
I had them in the playoffs. I had them as a wild card because I didn't think they would fall off. And I didn't think Chicago would work. I didn't think Chicago would ascend to the level that I definitely didn't have them as a number 2 seed.
Well, I'm always a little leery when you lose both coordinators, because Detroit is a very particular team, like culture wise, and I think that anything throws their formula off. And I think that we saw that throughout the season was that Detroit didn't look like the Lions. We talked about it, or I talked about it when they played the teams that we felt were good teams or upper echelon teams, whether it be Kansas City early in the season, the Rams, whoever, they just got outclassed all across the board. Another one that I got wrong, barely, kind of, was that I was a little bit higher on the Jets. And I had the Dolphins finishing last. The Dolphins finishing last in the East. And they were going for it. They were going for it.
I think I moved New England to 2 just for optimism, just because I felt like Miami was kind of falling apart at the end of last year. Definitely had Buffalo winning. Because the pundits were saying New England was going to make the playoffs. I was like, I just didn't really believe in Drake May, but I just felt like Miami didn't believe in Tua, and the Jets do the worst rebuilds. Like they half rebuild, like they rebuild the front office and give the front office the same old spare parts on the field, and it doesn't work.
How about Garrett Wilson leading them in receiving yards?
My man hasn't caught a pass since like before Halloween.
The King Day. Miami tried to help me though. They started out 2-7. You know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna take I'm taking a fifth of credit for that. You know what I'm saying? I'm taking a fifth of credit for that. I had Green Bay, obviously this still could happen. It won't, but it could. I had Green Bay going to the Super Bowl. Like I thought
my Super Bowl predictions been pretty much desperately out of it for a while. I had Baltimore and Dallas.
I had Buffalo and Green Bay.
Yeah, they were just clawing to try to.
And I thought Green Bay was on track.
I don't know what the hell happened to Dallas.
Green Bay was on track until Micah Parsons went down, and then Jordan Love got the concussion. So, hey, I'm not selling Green Bay up the river yet. I think Green Bay could beat Chicago this weekend, but we'll come back to that on Friday. We both thought that Matthew Stafford's back was going to be worse than it was.
Yeah, I didn't think he was going to come back. I thought it was going to be a wrap. I didn't think because he didn't play much. He didn't practice much. He didn't play any preseason games. And every time they talked about the Rams, it was about the lack of Stafford participating in throwing and pad and contact and so forth and so on.
Yeah, we thought that Carolina would be improved, but we didn't think that they would make the playoffs and win the division or anything like that.
Yeah. I think they just by default won a coin toss.
Well, Atlanta finished in a 3-way tie. That's how Carolina got in. Like if the Saints would have won on Sunday, Tampa would be here instead of Carolina. And you know, and let me hold on. Wait. Time out.
How did that happen anyway? Yeah.
Let me tell y'all something, TikTok, by the way. You know what I mean? So I was sitting up here talking about, I made a video Sunday talking about, hey, don't pray today for what you could have did yesterday. Correct. You know what I'm saying? So Tampa lost. Tampa beat Carolina. And then the guy comes back and says, oh, you must didn't watch the game, because if you did, you'd have saw we had to beat Tampa and the referees. And then, you know, which made me reply, I don't know if you watch the NFL very often, because the good teams actually overcome that. And you went 8-9 and finished in a 3-way tie. I don't want to hear you ever talk about the refs kept you out of the playoffs. Like, you know what I'm saying? So that's first and foremost.
Yeah.
And I got another one for college football too, because I'm tired of y'all non-comprehending people out there. But anyway, but yeah, like that. I just thought that'd be fun if we just kind of look back at some things that we said that just went off the rails, because you know a lot of people.
I think I did like a parlay for like division winners. I'm pretty sure that didn't hit. That's probably a wash. It's probably on the app I don't even use anymore. The season it was a weird season. Wasn't a lot of breakout.
Right.
Like you had JSN and Puka Nacua going for a lot of yards.
Yeah.
Not a lot of big numbers in your big markets. Like Saquon didn't go for a lot of yards. Derrick Henry didn't go for a lot. It was like wasn't that many guys chasing records. It felt
Derrick
like
Henry still finished second though.
Yeah, but like, you know, it wasn't like, you know, this guy's sitting on 1,400 yards with 4 games left. You know, Myles Garrett had the sacks. You know, he was sitting on 20 plus for like a few weeks. But his team was doing so bad, it was like he wasn't even getting an opportunity to get sacks because they were behind and the team just run the ball, running the clock out. So, yeah, it was a strange year not seeing like when Mahomes was healthy and when Lamar was healthy and Burrow went out. It's just like, okay, like the wind kind of got taken out of the sails. And then college football was kind of pressing upon the NFL space. It's weird. I think the playoffs are going to be crazy because I think the regular season was oddly mundane. Like even Seattle's successful year.
It was just, yeah.
It just felt like they were out west. It wasn't talked about a lot. It just felt like a fluke. So now with the playoffs, everything is in prime time. Everything's on the line, one and done. It's gonna get nuts. And the refs need to make sure they hone in, do some yoga, some Pilates or something before the game. Focus, because we can't have you impacting the game. Because I don't want to hear another person say the NFL is rigged, but yet they watch the whole game and put in the 18-leg parlay. So I'm sick of hearing it. So y'all need to get on your dean, get everything straight, and be ready for the playoffs. So I think it's gonna be crazy.
Hey, Mr. Logical.
What we got?
Hey, remember when you said that Miami was gonna beat Ohio State?
I did say that, and to me, it didn't sound crazy. Some of these predictions I heard, because I end up seeing.
Did you see me going back and forth with them on TikTok?
I see you go. You went back and forth with a couple of people, and then I was like, "You got to win the trenches." Ohio State. I was like, with those type of wide receivers, their numbers should have been crazy, and like Jeremiah Smith, he was like right at 1,000, like 1,006 yards. It's like he should be going for like 220 a game. But they were throwing everything short, hence why Keontae jumped it, took it back. You saw that he also intercepted Julian Saint's brother in a high school semifinal game.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so
I didn't know that.
Pass. It was like a short pass to the left side when they were in high school.
Remember when we did our playoff preview?
The brother ran it back for a touchdown. Then he intercepted Julian in the.
Well, remember when we did our playoff preview? He was the guy that I brought up. You know, that was coming off of injury. And I was talking about how he's going to be a great NFL player. And then, yeah, there you go. Yeah. I got that right, maybe.
Yeah. Like I said, I just felt Ohio State didn't. Like I said, I felt like their passing game was pretty much like, all right, the defense isn't going to give up more than 16 points. We need to get to 17 and we'll win. And I think they played the whole year like that because it worked. And then when it didn't work against Indiana, I was like, the way they play isn't going to work going forward either. And that's what I felt.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's still they still held true to form because you take away that pick six, Miami only put up 17 on offense. So, it wasn't as if Miami just did something that nobody else did to them, but Miami's here now. And look at who they're playing, Mr. Logical. And this is Thursday night, by the way, for y'all out there. They're playing against Ole Miss, the story of the playoff. So, look.
Great game.
So Lane Kiffin, you know what I mean? Like, we're still going back and forth every week about who's going to coach, who's going to leave, who's going to go to LSU now, who's going to wait until the actual end of the playoff run. And, now they're talking about Charlie Weiss Jr., might be getting a phone call depending on who the Giants hire as their offensive coordinator. So, like, I don't know what's going on, but Ole Miss is here to be the story. So, Mr. Logical, simply put, can Ole Miss keep this thing going?
Watching Trinidad, Division II national championship quarterback.
Shout out to First State.
I think so.
Oh,
because
okay.
he looked poised. Georgia's front, a lot like Miami, very dangerous in the trenches, a lot of power and speed up front, a lot of athletic anomalies that play on that side of the ball. So he was out running them, out gunning them. Kirby Smart, like, I don't think there was like I don't think any team made poor decisions, in that game that caused them to lose a lead or whatever the case may be. That guy just got beat on, maybe I go safety help over top in that tie game, 34-34, fourth quarter. Like, I don't go zero coverage, but if that guy's been your guy all year long, you got a slot guy, you don't think that slot guy's going to run a go route, but he did, and Trinidad saw it, and that was the end. All the time it took to run that last 1 second off the game was kind of bothersome.
Well, like Kirby Smart definitely that third down call when they tied the game. Gunnar Stockton is generally a guy that takes off when he sees something he doesn't like. So I was right. That's what I was going to say. I was shocked in that moment.
Just get the clock, just to run the clock.
Yeah,
down.
I was shocked in that moment because you knew Ole Miss was going to march.
I don't know if you knew they were going to march, but you knew that they were going to have X amount of seconds to march in the event you threw an incomplete pass.
Well, they gave him a whole minute.
That's what I'm saying. So it's like,
yeah,
you run
like
that
legit
ball,
a whole minute.
Excuse me. If you run the ball now, Ole Miss, like teams come out, tie game, 35 seconds left, and you run like a draw play. And maybe if it pops for like 12 and the clock stops because they're moving the chains, or you throw a quick screen and it goes for like 18 yards. Now you're like, you know what? Maybe we could do it. But they run that draw play, get tackled. They're letting the clock run, and they're playing for overtime. Unfortunately, I was happy it didn't go to overtime because I hate the college overtime rules.
Right.
Because I like the 2-point conversion part of it, and I was like, it's gonna get to that. These two teams were just moving and grooving. I was like, it's gonna get to that, and I was gonna be upset. So I'm happy the game ended the way that it did. Even though I did pick Georgia to win the national championship. But yeah, I think Trinidad, I think he just handles it well. I think the team has just been kind of immersed in this adversity with the coaches and everything else, and having microphones in their face asking about the coach. And I think the big FU to Lane Kiffin might be a greater motivator than we originally imagined.
I thought
that was going to be the detriment. It's like, oh, how good is this Golden guy? Is he going to be organized? But I think they might be rallying around this dude used us to get this other job, and we're beating these teams. Like we're it's not like LSU is coming to Ole Miss and just mud stomping us all the time, and he has no choice but to lead because we're consistently 7-5 every year. It's like we're 11-1, and you left to
Right.
go to the team in the next state over. So
That,
I
and
think
a
that
team
might
that
be
we
a
consider a
bond.
rival.
Consider our rival. So I think that might be a bonding force. So like, yeah, I'm gonna go Ole Miss.
Okay.
Close one. A lot like the Georgia game. I just think the way Trinidad was playing, I think the way that, like I said, Golden was like controlling the sideline, the way he was getting into his defense. I like their defensive tackle, 6'8", 330. I'm like, hey, Atlanta, just come on. He's sitting right there.
Just keep it
And
going.
he wasn't taking any breaks. He was exhausted, but he wasn't coming off the field. And he was eating up 2 blocks every time. He was taking on double teams. Yeah, I like what they were able to do. Carson Beck isn't as mobile as Gunnar Stockton, so I think Gunnar was getting out of some stuff that he should have lost. Like, it was a couple times where it's 2nd and 7, but you look at the replay and someone had him wrapped up and it would have been 2nd and 16, and somehow he got out of it. So yeah, I don't think Carson Beck's getting out of that.
So, I was down on Georgia this year. So, so Georgia,
you know me, I'm listen, logical. Math is logical. I understand that.
So, Georgia made it a lot further than I thought they would this year. I had them in the playoff, but I just didn't think very highly of them because they had a couple of things that Kirby Smart teams don't have. They didn't have the strong secondary, which is his strong suit. Yeah. And Georgia didn't get a lot of pressure on the quarterback.
And they bit him.
But even with that being said, but even with that being said, they were the one team going into the playoff that played Ole Miss that held Ole Miss under 400 yards the first time they played them. You know what I mean? So they had that going for them. But, as I like to say, when you go up against these offensive guys, and I know Lane Kiffin wasn't there, but you can't tell me that Charlie Weiss Jr. hasn't picked up some kind of Kiffinisms along the way. So I'm a big proponent of you let that offensive dude see your defense for a second time now. You know what I mean? So there's things that they know didn't work in that first game or that you slowed down a little bit. And this game started out the same way as the last game because the first time they played Georgia, they jumped out early and then Georgia shut them down in the second half. Ole Miss started this game 12-0. And I got nervous. And I was like, ooh, are we going to see the same kind of – because Kirby's going to adjust. That. Now, on to Miami. Look.
Oh, wait, real quick. Shout out to Gunnar Stockton for taking that hit and then get back up for the quarterback sneak. NFL would have buzzed down. He definitely should have saw a doctor, at least for a second. He should have saw somebody after that hit. But instead, nope, back to the huddle. Yeah.
No, 100%.
Taking that, yeah.
But yeah, so back to Miami, this is the Miami team that I've been looking for all year. Now, granted, the offense isn't looking very good still. They're still a little clunky, but that defense is doing what I thought Miami's defense would do a lot of the year, where I was asking these questions. Is Miami the best team in the country? They have the trenches. They have, they could go battle with anybody. So I think that this Ohio State game, Mr. Logical, was that it was like that version of Buffalo that I was talking about, where, you had to go on the road, you had to go into some tough places. People are out on you because you were supposed to be at the top of the AFC. Now you're kind of in the middle. I mean, they're the 6th seed. You're kind of in the middle. So like now pressure's on you because this isn't around. Well, Miami had the other effect where they lost those 2 games to Louisville and SMU, and people got out early and said, I'm done with Miami. Yeah. So Miami came into this game against Ohio State, who a lot of people still felt was the best team in the country, was going to win the national title.
31-14 predictions.
Yeah.
31-10, 34-17. That are crazy predictions.
Miami still has a top 3, if not number 1, best defensive player in college football, Ruben Bain, who should be a Washington Commander very soon. They have Hakeem Messador. So they were going to answer that bell, and Miami has one thing that a lot of teams don't got. Nobody can cover Jeremiah Smith. But Miami has dudes fast enough to stay with him.
Just run next to him.
Just run next to him. You know, so I like what I saw from Miami. Now, back down to the Ole Miss game. I expect a lot of Mark Fletcher pounding the ball down Ole Miss's throat and trying to keep Ole Miss's offense off of the field. You know, Miami has done a very good job in the playoff of just settling down, maybe being a little conservative, you know what I mean, but settling down and not letting their opponent get explosives, you know what I mean? And that's what they're going to need to stop, you know, because Trinidad Chambliss should have been in that Heisman ceremony. Like I was making the joke all year that the Heisman might be going to Trinidad, you know, double entendre for you out there, you know, but I like this Ole Miss team. I just think that Miami's got a lot of momentum right now. You know, I think that a lot of people are still waiting on that proverbial shoe to drop. Like, let me see the Miami that lost to SMU. Let me see the Miami. And the way we were talking about Ohio State's defense, Miami hasn't given up more than 17 points since they lost that game to SMU. They held Ohio State to 1.9 yards per carry last week, 3 for 10 on third down. So Keywan Lacey's going to have a rough night, I think. Now, with that being said,
I think that's because they knew Sand wasn't going to throw the ball downfield.
Right. No, that definitely played a role. That definitely played a role in it. But if I was Miami on these critical third downs, if you could get Ole Miss into, say, 3rd and 8, I might want to drop 7. I might want to drop 8. You know, I might want to just do something like that to throw Ole Miss off because they're not. So this is one of those games where, obviously, I'm not a coach, but this is one of those games where I go, do we continue to do what we do, or should we mix it up just a little bit and give them something?
I say do what you do. I say do what you do because that won't get messed up.
I know, but you got tape on what I do.
Drop the guy into zone that's normally rushing on 3rd and 8. Head's going to be looking the wrong way. The slant's going to go right behind him, and it's going to be a conversion. And it's like, you know what? Just put your hand in the dirt and go after the quarterback. We'll stick to what we do because you're obviously doing it well enough to be in the semifinals of the College Football Playoff. I don't see why you would. Maybe you introduce a wrinkle, maybe a different kind of blitz. But as far as like whatever I do, like I said, I'm not, like you said, I'm not a coach. I feel the same way. But I feel like any change you make needs to be aggressive because that's the instinct of a football player. I think your changes should be, we're going to do this kind of blitz. So this kind of blitz is go after the quarterback. Not we're going to run this special 3-3-5 zone we haven't played all year and try to take away this. No, that's too much stuff to introduce the week of a pressure game like a playoff game. But I need you running down the hill being aggressive. Football players know that. They've known that since they were 8 years old. That's something any of them could do.
Yeah, so I'm taking Miami. I think that this game is going to be won in the trenches. You know, I think that Miami is just playing with house money at this point, just like Ole Miss is. But I think that, Corey Heatherman on defense, who I talked about at the start of the season, I think he's going to have something ready, But then, Mr. Logical, if you look at the odds, the next game that I'm about to talk about is the national championship game. But on top of that, let me take another second to tell y'all on TikTok, is that y'all know exactly what I meant when I said Indiana and Ole Miss were Cinderellas. From the standpoint of they haven't been here before. A lot of people didn't predict them to be here at the start of the year. It's easy to sit up here today and say Indiana's the best team in the country. You didn't say that 6 weeks ago. You know what I'm saying?
Last year when they were 10-0, everyone was like, they're 10-0, but do they really deserve a spot?
Yeah, most of y'all probably had them losing to Oregon the first time. You know what I'm saying? So, but Mr. Logical, Dan Lanning, revenge, does it mean anything?
Well, you put me on to Dan Lanning in pressure games, and you don't feel like he handles them that well.
Ooh.
Right?
He does listen.
Yeah, listen. My mother always told me pick up people's good habits, not their bad habits. Your great habit is your ability to analyze coaches in NCAA, especially ones who are west of the Mississippi that
Yeah,
no one else talks about.
Dan Lanning will use your quote and bust your ass. You know what I'm saying? But like he's 48-7 at Oregon. And you know what I mean? The good news is he doesn't lose to Oregon State. He doesn't
Yeah.
lose, to Iowa or whatever. But what he does do, he runs into Michael Penix's. You know what I'm saying? Like you saw what Ohio State did to them coming out of the Rose Bowl last year. He will lose a big game or two.
And Indiana's backs are averaging like 6 yards a clutch or something like that.
Yeah. He does
I
not
like
risk.
Signetti. I like his confidence. Yeah, it's allowed because of his hue. We can't, they allow that kind of ego in that shell. But it works. I don't think Mendoza is going to be a world beater quarterback. I don't think he's going to have like one of these great games. I just think he's going to stay in his head. He seems like a very humble, smart, accomplished quarterback. I don't think he's going to make any bad plays.
Okay.
And the run game, I think the run game and the RPO with Indiana is going to be the difference. Last week, Texas Tech getting shut out, or the last game, Texas Tech getting shut out by Oregon. I don't think anyone saw that coming because I believe they were averaging like 44 points a game. And then they went out and just spent $5 million on Brendan Sorsby. So Brendan should be sending Dan Lanning or whoever the defensive coordinator is in Oregon like a basket of flowers or some candy or something, thanking them because they overpaid because of that ass whooping. I'm not saying he wasn't going to get a lot of money, but like they probably started a negotiation at $5 million just to try to make up for the fact that they just lost 23-0 to Oregon. But second time around, give me the Heisman Trophy and the Cinderella Indiana Hoosiers to win this game and play Ole Miss for the national championship.
So let me put on my Mr. Logical hat for a second.
Let's hear it.
The game inside the game, right? So when they played earlier this year, it was at Autzen. A lot of people didn't give Indiana a chance, myself included. So as we were just talking about Miami and Ole Miss, they went into the game with house money. Do you feel that now that we're here, Indiana's the only undefeated team in the country, beat Ohio State, beat Alabama by what? 31.
35.
And, 35. There you go. By 5 touchdowns. Oregon under the radar, not the usual, explosive Oregon that we've seen over the years. Do you feel that we have a little role reversal where now some of that pressure from before that Indiana didn't have is you better finish the job now because you might not get another chance?
I think the Indiana pressure dissipated when they beat the brakes off Alabama, because this one of the key stats that came out of these last 2 years is that the teams with the byes are 1-7. Well, that one is Indiana,
right?
And that one came against one of your premier college football organizations in the country year.
Right, and it doesn't matter the quality of the team because people care about the names. Yeah.
But even with that, they were selected for a spot into the playoffs. I don't want to say given. They were selected.
Right.
And they went out and won, their road playoff game against Oklahoma, talking about Bama. And then they went to the Rose Bowl, where last year we saw our undefeated team in Oregon get steamrolled by your perennial top tier college football program that people felt snuck their way into the playoffs.
And they went on to win the title.
And then they went on to win the title. I think people probably had that same kind of esteem for Alabama. Getting that monkey off the back, setting the tone early, letting Oregon, now Oregon has to look at film. They have to really be like, okay, they didn't just eke out a victory against Bama. They dominated Bama from, kickoff to sunset.
So in that first game that they played, Indiana picked off Dante Moore twice, including a pick six. They sacked him 6 times, and they went into Autzen and won 30-20. Now, a lot has changed since then. Oregon has been hard for me to gauge all year because I'm still looking at them through the lens of give the ball to somebody and watch them run 75 yards.
Yeah.
And Oregon is not that this year. They still have, great runners. They still have, Dante Moore, I think, is going to be a better NFL quarterback than Francisco Mendoza. But this is now. So with that being said, I don't know if I've seen the best of Oregon yet this season still. So I'm just going to go ahead and say it's not in there. Because I've been waiting for Oregon. Like we saw the game against Oklahoma State earlier this year where the guy made the NIL
Oregon
comment.
49-14 blowout.
Yeah, I think it ended up being like 69-3 or something. But it was because the guy had made the comment about the NIL. And that was Dan Lanning's motivation to go, well, the thing about Indiana is Sig Nasty wants that same smoke that Dan Lanning looks for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, I'm going to take Indiana as well. Close game, down to the wire. And then, so I got Miami and Indiana playing for the national title.
We'll see how it goes. I haven't been really good at these predictions, but I feel confident in my Indiana prediction.
Hey, you picked Miami.
I felt confident in that because I just felt like Ohio State didn't. I don't think they didn't attack downfield enough. If I'm a defensive coordinator, I'm like, okay, I got one guy who's a stud that's coming back next year, and then another guy, Cordell Tate, is probably going to go in the top 10. But it's like, other than that, like I think I can contain the rest of this.
All right,
jump this bubble screen.
So Mr. Logical's got to roll, y'all. He got to sign out. I'm going to finish it off here. You know what I'm saying? So we will be back on Friday. Mr. Logical will be here as well. We're going to talk about, the reaction to Miami and Indiana, make NFL predictions to include our Super Bowl winner. And, we got to go around the association.
Absolutely.
So, you know what I'm saying? So we'll holler at you, Mr. Logical. Good luck on the midterm.
Gang.
Yes, sir.
More degrees.
Yes, sir. Holla. All right. So now, finishing this off, I wanted to talk about this, because all year long, we've been having these conversations. Is the SEC down? Can the SEC, can they maintain their dominance? Can they get back to their winning national title roots and all that stuff, right? Okay, here we go. So as I was thinking about this, you don't want to be hyperbolic and you can't be picking and choosing your arguments, right? So I'm not going to use the bowl game to make my point because both teams, whether they're SEC or not, are missing players, opt-outs, transfer portals, so on and so forth. So the bowl season is not a fair measure. The problem with SEC fans when they talk about this is back in the day, they used to use the bowl games as dominance. And then if they lost, they didn't want to be there. So now that they're losing the bowl games, they have excuses as they always do. But, so let's peel it back. Let's look at the regular season for a second. So we talked about the SEC title contenders, Ole Miss, Georgia, Alabama, and A&M. Georgia played 2 of them. Mississippi and Alabama. Alabama played Georgia. The rest didn't play each other. So this gauntlet that the SEC talks about every week is a struggle. Every week, is on the line. No, it's not. Because you aren't even playing these teams. Like when I look across the board, Ole Miss didn't even play Tennessee or Missouri. And you already know I don't think they're good teams, but I'm just making a point because those were bowl teams. They didn't even play Vanderbilt or Texas. A&M didn't play Vanderbilt. Alabama didn't play Texas. Georgia didn't play Vanderbilt. So where's this gauntlet that the SEC fans are holding on to? Which brings me to the next point. What the hell is a SEC fan? I'm a Florida State fan. I don't cheer for Clemson. I don't cheer for North Carolina. I don't cheer for Virginia, even if that makes the ACC look better. Because fuck them. That ain't my team. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, I digress. So the SEC went 12-5 this regular season against the other Power 4 conferences. This is where you get into the nitpicking and picking and choosing, right? 12-5 sounds great. Until you peel it back and go, oh, Alabama beat Wisconsin. Tennessee beat Syracuse. South Carolina and Vanderbilt beat Virginia Tech. Missouri beat Kansas. Auburn beat Baylor. None of those teams made a bowl game from those other Power 4 conferences. So you beat up on the dreads and scum of those leagues, and now you want to beat your chest, Mike Tomlin style, and say we're the dominant force in college football. Now, LSU did beat Clemson before we knew that Clemson was going to fall apart, so I'll give them credit for that because I'm fair. Mississippi State beat Arizona State. Great job. OU beat Michigan. A&M beat Notre Dame. So there are some good wins in there too. But the majority of those wins are against teams whose seasons ended a month ago. And they didn't even get to play these ESPN exhibitions, if you will. Tennessee and Missouri didn't even beat a team with a winning record this year. That's SEC and non-SEC. So I couldn't even tell you who their best wins are. I guess I'll go with Mississippi State for both of them. Because even though Mississippi State did play in a bowl game, they were still 5-7. So your best win is against a team that's 5-7, right? And Tennessee and Missouri stayed in the poll for most of the season until you just couldn't keep them in there anymore. And this is where preseason rankings become dumb because Tennessee lost Nico Iamaleava, replaced him, and now all of a sudden they brought in a quarterback from Appalachian State, Joey Aguilar, and he could replace Nico, no problem. So they get ranked in the top 25. Florida was ranked in the top 25 to start this year. Lost at home to South Florida, scored 16 points in that game. South Carolina started the season ranked. And then I saw, at some point in this season, there was a team that beat South Carolina, and the headline was, preseason number 13, South Carolina loses. We were in week 8. They weren't ranked anymore. So referring to a team as preseason ranked already let you know you're not talking about a good team, right? Texas, they finished off the year well. They beat A&M. I'll get that to A&M in a second. So Texas lost early to Ohio State. 14-7 at the shoe, no shame. But there was no point in that game that we thought that Ohio State was going to lose that game. Ohio State took their foot off the gas and said, let's let Texas keep running themselves into the wall and get out of here with a victory, right? So then they played Sam Houston, UTEP, and some other candy-ass jabroni team. And all of a sudden, I think it was San Jose State, baby. And then it's all of a sudden, Texas looks bad because they can't perform against these teams. Yes, because Arch, which you heard here on Sports Reports is ordered before the season started, Arch Manning threw 2 interceptions against Louisiana Monroe last year. Completion percentage not very impressive. He was more impressive with his legs last year than he was his arm. So coming into this year, I had Texas as a 3-loss team. Oh, guess what? Texas lost 3 games. What I didn't count on is that they were going to lose in the swamp. So that's where the SEC can say, well, Florida, even though they didn't go to a bowl game, still beat Texas. That says more about Texas than it does Florida when you consider that Florida, as I said, lost to South Florida at home. You saw what Miami did to them. So I don't want to hear it. A&M got through this season. Hey, they beat Notre Dame. That was a great win. I can't take that away from them. Their other out-of-conference wins, was a FCS school, Utah State, and UTSA. You know what I'm saying? Go Runners, but still. So A&M wins those games. They come into the SEC. They play Missouri's backup quarterback. They lose to Texas, that same Texas team. They didn't play Vandy. They didn't play Alabama. They didn't play Georgia, Ole Miss. They beat Mississippi. So what I'm getting at is A&M got into the playoff because of their schedule. So all these SEC fans say things like, oh, you played a weak ACC schedule. You played a weak Big 12 schedule. You wouldn't survive in the SEC. We don't even know if A&M would survive in the SEC. Because SEC didn't play A&M didn't play anybody in the SEC that has a pulse. So no, the SEC is not down. The transfer portal has just made things equal. You widening out your conferences has allowed teams to duck smoke that they would otherwise get. So the SEC is not down. College football is just reaping what they sow for having these big-ass conferences. That's what's happening to the SEC. And now when these teams get to the playoffs, like a A&M, they played Notre Dame in week 2. They played Texas the last game of the regular season. That's a long time to go without playing competition. 97 teams in the SEC. That's a long time to go wire to wire without, playing any other real competition. And then they got to the playoff, and what did they do? Some lowly ACC team held them to 3 points. At Kyle Field. This wasn't even a bowl game. This was at Kyle Field, the 12th man. The 12th man that's supposedly better than the Seattle Seahawks' 12th man. Alabama. All last year, all we heard was, oh, Indiana, how they get in the playoff. Alabama should have been in. Alabama should have. Can I tell you a secret, y'all? In that 12-5, I talked about the SEC wins. You know what the SEC also did? Alabama lost to a Florida State team that didn't make the bowl game. And I don't want to hear that it was the first game of the season because Florida State was breaking in new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, new quarterback, new receivers across the board. So whatever applies to Alabama applies there too. So, that was included in the 5 that, that the SEC suffered from. I don't know what the next couple of years of college football looks like. But what I'm happy about is that the SEC can't get mulligans anymore. Like if we go back, and I promise I'm going to wrap this up, y'all. But if we go back to 2011, for example, that was the year of the infamous 9-6 LSU Alabama game where LSU went into Tuscaloosa and won that game with the Honey Badger. So Oklahoma State was the other team in contention. And then they blew a lead in Ames, Iowa on a Friday night, missed extra point. And they got bumped out of the BCS. We ended up with Alabama and LSU in the national title game at the Superdome. The House of Horrors, as I like to call it. But then you go back and peel that back. And the same people that will tell me that every week is supposed to matter in the regular season didn't give a damn that LSU just went into Tuscaloosa and won that game. And Alabama got a mulligan. If every week mattered, if the regular season mattered, Alabama's not in that title game because you had your chance on your home field and you blew it. But the SEC got off on that over the years. They would lose these games. And then as other teams lose around the nation, and you got this pool of teams to pick from, the default was always, let's grab the SEC team. I remember 2018, the Tua year, where Tua hit Devontae Smith over the top against Georgia in overtime. Auburn beat both of those teams. Lost to Georgia in the SEC title game in the rematch. Neither one of those teams won the conference. Well, I guess Georgia won it. My bad. Georgia won the conference. But Alabama still got in just because Auburn lost an extra game. You know what I mean? And that's where in this playoff, this 14 playoff, Auburn probably would have still got in. This is why you need multiple teams. This is why you need more than 4. I say 8 is still the right number, but this is why you need more than 4, because as we can see this season, there are teams that are more than... Think about this. Miami, any other year, loses to SMU and Louisville. They're not in the playoff. They just beat Ohio State, whose only loss was to Indiana, who's the only undefeated team in the country. Because the Big Ten didn't really have a tough schedule either, but you get the point. The SEC is not down. The SEC is just playing by the same rules that everyone else is now. The only reason Alabama got in the playoff this year is because they didn't get in the playoff last year. And they weren't going to do that 2 years in a row. Now, last thing. Going forward, I don't think a conference is going to own the national titles the way that the SEC did, in that run, But that goes back to the other point that I made a few minutes ago. Saying you ain't giving me a hard time. I've been on Miami all year. Saying, come on, Chris. That's the difference between me and you. I tell it how I see it. You tell it how it might be. But anyway, this is how it goes. There's no mulligans. These SEC teams aren't going to have a chance to lose and get rewarded later. They're not going to be able to lose and then go, hey, we're still better than that team because our conference is tougher. No, we're going to put all y'all in, and we're going to find out on the field if you're better. And guess what? If you're better, we'll shake your hand and say, good job, sir. If you ain't better, no excuses. Can't win them all, right? That's the essence of sports. That's the referendum on the SEC. This is Sports Reports as Ordered. I am 2-5, your unorthodox statistician, coming to you from the Alamo, going left so much you thought I was southpaw. Mr. Logical was here earlier. Good luck to him on his midterm. We be back Friday. Like, review, subscribe, share, rate, do all the free things, do all the good things. Liquid Death in your hand, or if you got a little baby tummy ache like me, you got a Canada Dry in your hand. But get something in your hand when you watch the Sports Reports as Ordered. Love y'all so much. See you in a few days. And be on the lookout for 2-5 Daily. Be on the lookout for the Say Less Say More podcast. Be on the lookout for ChopChat.com. Michael Wilson, that's me. Love y'all. See y'all Friday.
Yeah, we breaking it down. Truth rings in your speakers, every word is the crown. From the north side hustle to that southern flame. Midwest grind, west coast of the game. Sports talk kings, yeah, we wear that crown. Turn it up, let them know it's about to go down. Sports reports, no gimmicks, no clowns. 2-5, Mr. Logical, we run this town. Real talk only, no chaser, no doubt. From the east to the west, it's the order we shout.
It's about to go down.
Hey! Sports reports, no gimmicks, no clowns. 2-5, Mr. Logical, we run this town.